Happy Wednesday. We are almost to the middle of June. Can you believe it? And today on the Cultivating Calmness podcast, I want to talk a little bit about why is my treatment taking so long? I thought I was going to be better by now. If you have ever thought this, or you have wondered, why maybe some of the people you know, or even yourself, have been in treatment for a very long time, sometimes there's a good explanation for that. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. When it comes to deciding what to talk about, there's always a bunch of different subjects I could talk about here. And I try to pick different things that I haven't maybe touched on or touched on in a while. And I was thinking about this today because this has come up with newer clients that I have and just trying to set some expectations for treatment. Now, there are different types of treatment, whether, again, we're talking about counseling or you're talking about medicine or holistic care or, different types of treatment that may be out there. The treatment may, for some, go quickly, right? They could have one treatment of something and they could see immediate results and maybe not need to come back. You could see somebody that has several treatments and again, see results and not need to come back. And you could see people going to treatment and treatment and treatment and treatment and treatment, and they're seeing maybe incremental results. And then you see people doing that and going to lots of treatments and they're not really seeing the results they're hoping for. And we have to ask ourselves, why? Why could I be going to treatment for X amount of time and not necessarily see the results that I am looking for and or hoping for or expecting? And I have some thoughts on that. Some from my personal experience and some just from observation. So when I have clients that come into counseling, most of the people that I get coming into counseling now want to be there. They, have sought me out. They are coming for a purpose. They recognize that they need a change and they want to make that change. And they are more willing to take those steps. When I worked in the hospital setting and when I worked in more of an outpatient setting, um, when I worked strictly with kids, a lot of times, not all the time, the kids are being brought by their parents or their family members because the parent or family member thought they needed counseling, which they did. But oftentimes when that was the case, the child didn't really want to be there. So they weren't really motivated to change. They weren't really motivated to do something different. And sometimes the child asked to be there and asked, for the therapy and wanted to make the change. So when you are going to counseling or going to, again, I'm just going to use counseling because that's what I do. But you can relate this to any type of treatment that you may be in, whatever it is. In counseling, if you are going, you're seeking it out, you're probably automatically off to a better start than somebody who is being forced to go to counseling for one reason or another. But then, I recently saw a patient and, there's a lot of stuff going on. And the reason they were coming in was, very specific and necessary and needed. And we do need to get to that. However, there did appear to be maybe a lot of barriers or potential barriers to seeing improvement in that area. What I mean by that is that we were going to need to start lower, right? We were going to need to get more to the base because we needed to build up support so that moving on to the treatment, moving on to some form of processing of the trauma or the grief or the whatever was going on, we would be more palatable, would be more manageable than if we just jumped right in and started trying to do some processing and started to work on some of these difficult stressors. And the more we talked, the more I learned, that there was stressor upon stressor upon stressor upon stressor. And it was like, well, no wonder you feel the way you feel. And how can we figure out a way to get you some support? How can we figure out a way to, um, mm, change some of these stressors? Some were inevitable, some were unavoidable. So it was like, we're going to have to spend some time trying to decide like what can change here. Is there anything that can be different? Because ultimately you're going to need something to change here in order to be able to do more of this work that you want to do. And this isn't the only client I see this with. I see this with a lot of clients. Even myself, right? We have big, grand goals, but if the other things that the building blocks are not supporting that goal, well, getting to that goal is going to be awfully hard. I often use the example of like a staircase. So if like you're in the basement, you're stuck in the basement, and most people will have about 12 steps from the basement up to their first floor. And if you had the first step and the last step, and there's 10 steps in between, but there are none of those, how are you going to get up to the top? We're not giants, we can't, go from step 1 to step 12. Maybe I could go from step 1 to step 4 or something, and I would have some difficulty reaching that and getting myself back, up to that step. So we have to build the step as we go, right? And sometimes we're going to go backwards and sometimes we're going to go forwards on those steps. That's what we're talking about is we want to get to that, 12th step. But what is it that's needed in between the 12 steps to get you there? So, in counseling, that's coping strategies, that's support system, that's, if for me, I'm more functional. So we're talking about like healthy diet and exercise. That maybe have I talked to my doctor about my nutrients and my vitamins? Maybe there's some vitamins and nutrients that I'm deficient in and I'm lacking, right? If you have chemical sensitivity, that can look a lot like anxiety. And if we're not maybe looking at that and addressing that, then we may be treating the wrong thing, or we may be trying to jump too quickly into managing a symptom and not really addressing those underlying causes and those building blocks to the symptom, right? So all I want to say is that, when it comes to doing any type of treatment, we often get in thinking, yeah, I'm going to get in there. We're going to talk it out. I'm going to process all that crap. And then I'm going to be done. We're going to be in and out in like 4 sessions or 8 sessions, or fill in the number that you think is going to, be it. And I can tell you that for a lot of people, that number it's an unknown. People ask me all the time, well, how long do you think I'm going to need? I don't know. First, I have to meet you, then we have to talk, and I have to do your intake. And, an intake really is more than just 1 session. It's usually a couple sessions, and it's getting to know you, getting to know your problem. I just did an intake today where, I had a bunch of background information, but we tended to focus in a specific area while we were talking. And so we didn't get to all the other things. And, as we were talking, it was like one thing on top of the other. I was learning, and I was like, well, no wonder, well, no wonder, well, no wonder. Like, and I'm going to keep doing that with you throughout our time together. And I'm going to use that information to help guide you and the changes that you can make and support you through that, right? If I am suggesting you do this thing over here, but you haven't told me this thing over here, and this is a really big barrier, well, of course, this thing isn't going to work. Right. And so when I learn what this barrier is, we can maybe change the suggestion to fit with some of the barriers that you currently have. Um, and, we're going to build on top of things. Another factor in what your progress is, what are you doing at home? So if you come to session, right, one of my friends who's been on the podcast and who has presented for me twice now, Preston Moore, talks a lot about this. And, he had a good analogy, right? If you are trying to like lose weight or, get in better shape, are you going to the gym 1 hour once a week? Probably not, right? If you thought you were going to build muscle, lose weight, and get in better shape by going to the gym 1 hour once a week, you'd be sorely mistaken. And that's how we treat our mental health oftentimes is, I got in for that appointment, I got my 60 minutes done, see you next week. But we aren't doing anything in between. We're not thinking about the session. We're not working on any of the skills addressed in the session. We're not making any changes between sessions. And so if that's the case, are you going to make the progress that you thought you were going to make? Because the change isn't necessarily happening in the in the office. I mean, some change is happening. We get those, good comments, those good things that come out, and it's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Great. Now take that information with you and do something with it, from the time you leave my office to the time you come back. And let's talk about it. Did it work? Didn't it work? Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? What changes did you try? What changes did you not try? All of those things are going to affect your outcomes and the way that you feel. So if we're talking about changing of diet and exercise, are you doing it? Or if we're talking about whether the doctor has, recommended certain supplements, are you taking them? If we're talking about getting better sleep, are you trying the things that were discussed? If we're talking about coping skills that you could try, are you actually trying them? Or are you just trying them in the 30 minutes before a session because you didn't try them and you're like, yeah, I tried them, right? I get it. Like myself included, there are things that I do really well and then I kind of slack off and then I got to get back in the groove. And I'm currently going through that. I had a little bit of, downslide in some of the things I was doing and we're trying to get back into doing it better. So, I get it. I've been there, done that. But that is why maybe you won't necessarily see the progress. Same thing for like physical therapy. If you're going and you're getting the exercises in your PT sessions, but then you're not going home and you're not doing the exercises, you may continue to not see the progress and you may continue to be in the PT longer than you need to be because you aren't doing the exercises at home, right? Same thing for counseling. So if you're wondering like how long it takes or why I'm not making the progress, you have to ask yourself, am I doing the steps necessary to make change on my own, in my own time, in my own way? So think about that when it comes to any of the changes you want to make, no matter what type of healing provider you are seeing. Are there things that you could be doing, and are you doing those things? And if you were doing them, do you think maybe your progress would move along further? Maybe, maybe not, but it's a good question to ask yourself. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you again next week.